Good afternoon, people. Titus here for part 13 of our Asteroids mini-series, and in this one, we'll work on creating the death code for our UFO enemy type, so our player has a way to destroy it. Let's not waste any time and jump right into it. Alright, so we're going to start by opening up our UFO blueprint, and then we are going to be adding a new custom event, so we'll right-click, do add custom event, and we'll just call this death. And then when our UFO dies, we're going to want to do the same thing our ship does, which is spawn emitter at location. I am using the starter template, which comes with some assets, including the explosion one. So you can create your own Niagara system if you want, or if you're using starter content, you can use that one. I am going to scale the explosion by 5 in all axes. That way it's a little bit bigger than the ship's explosion. For the location, we can pull our box collider in using control and then drag it in. Pull off that pin and search get world location. And from there, we just plug that at location in there. And then we can take our game manager reference, drag that in here. And we're going to be pulling in some functions. If you remember, when we spawned the UFO, we told the game manager to stop throwing rocks at the player. So when the UFO dies, we can unpause that, so basically start up the rock throwing again. The other thing we'll want to do is in the game manager, we are tracking whether or not a UFO has spawned, so we don't spawn multiple UFOs running around at the same time. So we can drag off the game manager and do set enemy spawned. We'll set it to false. And then when the UFO dies, we should also give some points to the player. And our point system is managed by our game manager as well. I think we called it I scored. And there's an input pin, so we can feed how many points we want to give the player. We did 50, I think, for the big rock, 100 for the medium rock, and I think 200 for the small one. So maybe we just double that and do 400 for the UFO, since it'll be moving around and shooting the player. So it's more of a hazard. And then, of course, we'll come into a destroy actor and actually destroy the UFO. Now, there's another function we're going to need here, and that's going to be related to the mood lighting. Now, originally when we spawned the UFO, we want to dim the lights so we can maybe show off the UFO a little bit more and make the asteroids that had already spawned a little bit more dangerous because they're dark. So I want to still be able to do that, but there's a problem with it. We made it in the UFO blueprint, which works for turning off the lights, but not so much for turning it back on. Because when we tell it to run the timeline, it's going to run through the rest of the code, and it's going to hit this destroy actor very quickly, like in less than a second. And this timeline is 2 seconds long, which means it's going to be in garbage collection because it's been destroyed. So it's going to error out on us. So we need to migrate this code into another blueprint that is going to be persistent when the UFO dies. That would be the level blueprint or our game manager. So either one. I think I'll move it into the game manager for now. So we can go to our blueprints, we'll open up our game manager, and then we just need to find an empty space, and I'm going to do a new custom event. You can call it the same thing, so we can call it mood lighting, and then we can do another custom event, and we can call that reset lighting, or whatever you want to call it. Now originally when we did the mood lighting, we got a reference to the directional light in the begin play. I haven't tested it with the game manager, but I imagine that would not work because I believe the game manager is going to hit the world first before the level blueprint stuff does. So I don't think it'll be a valid reference. So instead what we'll do is, instead of doing it in the begin play of the game manager, we'll do it in the actual function, which will only be called after the UFO has been created, long after the directional light's already been existing, so it will definitely not be an issue. So we can say get actor of class. We could say search for the directional light, And then I, for some reason, already have a directional light. I must have created that by accident, so I will delete that. We'll pull off this into a is valid. And then off the is valid, we can then promote to a variable, and we will call it a directional light reference, or ref, whatever you want to do. And then now that we have that stored, we can come into a timeline. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to open up this timeline. I'm going to set the time to be 2 seconds, like we did with the other one. We'll add a single float track. We can call that float track the intensity because it's controlling the light intensity. We can use just 2 keyframes, so right click, add keyframe. We'll do one at time 0, value 1. The value of 1 is when the light is on. The second keyframe will be time 2 seconds, which is the end of the timeline, with a value of 0, which the light intensity is off. We can then frame the graph, and you can right click on each node and set it to auto, so it's a smoother interpolation. Compile, save, and we'll go back to the event viewer, and now we have our intensity option here. We can then take our directional light reference, pull into a set intensity. It'll make the necessary reference to the light component. And then on the update pin, plug that in there, and then just plug your float value into the intensity, and that'll be a nice smooth turning the lights off. To turn the lights back on, you can just take this pin and hook it to the reverse from end, where it'll basically just kind of undo what you did. And that should basically turn the lights off when the UFO spawns, and then when the UFO dies, we'll call the reset lighting and we'll turn the lights back on. So we can delete this atmosphere code, we don't need it. And then in the game manager reference, we'll pull off and do reset lighting. And that's when the UFO dies, it'll turn the lights back on. It'll then start chucking rocks at the player again. It'll set the enemy spawn to be false, so another enemy can spawn, or the game manager can spawn in another enemy. We can increase the score, and then it finally destroys the UFO. Now, because we destroyed that lighting code that we did here, we need to make an adjustment over here. Mood lighting no longer exists in this context. The directional light is no longer needed as a reference, so we can delete that here. We don't need the is valid check, the get actor. But on the begin play, we need to turn the lights off, right? So we made a reference to the game manager, so instead we can just control drag that out, and you can call mood lighting from the game manager, and then you're cooking with gas. And then I think this function's done, so we can select everything, press C to comment. We'll call it our death code, and I'm going to give it this lovely blue. Okay, now for the rest of the death code, or to actually call the death code, we can use an overlap event. You can also use a hit event. I mean, there's a few different ways you can do it. Overlaps are just, I think, set up by default, so they're a little bit easier to use sometimes. Off the overlap code, we're going to be making a few different casts. So the UFO can run into the player, it can run into the laser when the player fires at it, and it can run into the asteroids. You can set up whatever logic or behavior you want to happen between each game object. I think if the UFO runs into an asteroid, I think I want the UFO to die, and I want the asteroid to explode, but I don't want the player to get the points for the asteroid, but maybe I'll give the player the points for the UFO. If the UFO runs into the laser, obviously the player shot it, then I want the UFO to die, and I want the laser to die, or get destroyed, and then I want to increase the points there. And then if the UFO runs into the player, I want the player to die, but I actually don't want the UFO to die. So I want the UFO to keep going, because I think that'd be more fun. So I will come into a cast to BP, we'll do the laser first. And we can hook up the actor pin here. and then pull off the blue pin. The function we made in the laser was, I think I hit something. Yeah, I hit something. That'll destroy the laser basically. And then we can call into our death code for the UFO, which is this right here. If the cast fails, we can check to see if it hit the ship. So I'll plug this object pin in here, and if it hit the ship, I want to call death from the ship. So if you pull off this pin and hit death, this is not going to work. This is going to destroy the UFO. Instead, as the BP ship, pull off that. Oh, we didn't create the death code, so we need to do that. So let's go into our ship code. That's right, because we're using a hit function or a hit event. So easy enough. Let's just create a new custom event. We'll just call it death. We are done with this print string, so we can shift delete, get rid of that. Actually, I probably should have just deleted it. And then just drag this up here. Keep it simple, because I forgot the death code actually runs from the game manager, so that's why we didn't have this on the player, but we kind of need it now. So when the hit collider triggers, we'll just simply call death. And then when death is called, it'll spawn the emitter, it'll call death from the game manager, which decreases the lives and respawns the player, and then it destroys the actor. And then from the UFO side, oops, let me compile that real quick before I forget. But from the UFO side, as the ship, we should then be able to call death. And that'll be the death function. So this death function is the UFO, this death function is the ship. And if we don't hit the ship, then obviously we can still check for it to be safe. And we actually kind of need to anyways, because we need to call a function from it. We probably hit the rock, right? The asteroid. So BP asteroid. And then I'm going to drag a new one, because why not? Okay, so when we hit the rock, what do we want to do? Well, we want to destroy the rock. So we can come into, we have a destroy function. And if we open up our asteroid, we made that right here. We use this for the game manager to clear the screen when the player dies. And this was basically a way for us to kill all the rocks without increasing the player's score. Because we handle death in the asteroid a few different ways. Depending on how the asteroid dies, we might actually increase the score, or we might not. And in this instance, for the UFO, if the UFO runs into the asteroid, we are not going to give the player points for that, at least for the asteroid. We will, however, trigger death on the UFO, because I think the asteroid should be able to destroy the UFO. And that will give the points for the UFO, but not the rocks, if that makes sense. So then we can comment this as our overlap code. Make it the same blue. Compile and save. And the only other thing I'd say to change is in the game manager, we have an enemy spawner function for testing. We only had it like 400, negative 400, which is kind of in the middle of the screen. Let's just go ahead and push it out to 4,000, negative 4,000. So it either spawn on the far left or the far right. And then if you remember in the UFO, I think the first thing we do is we move to world origin, 000. So now when we play the game, the thing should spawn outside of our view, and it'll just rush for the center. And then once it hits center, it starts moving randomly, and depending on what it hit, wow, that rock went really fast. Depending on what it hits, it'll either destroy the asteroids, it'll destroy me, or it'll get destroyed. So there it is. So it went dark. Can I shoot it? I can shoot it, and now it's light again. So now when the next one spawns, we'll see if it hits me. So it hits me, and it's fine. It hit a rock right there. Oh, it's gonna try to hit me again. But yeah, we can see what it looks like when so you can see it hits the rocks and it's being destroyed. So that handles death in every instance, right? So when it runs into me, I die. When it runs into a rock, it dies. When it runs into my lasers, it dies. So, alright people, I think we'll cut the video here to keep it somewhat short. But in the next one, we'll create the code that allows the UFO to shoot an energy ball that will destroy the player. As always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and see you on the next one.